Thanks so much. It's very nice.
Not at all.
Please come in, come and sit down in Buckingham Palace.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
Buckingham Palace has just released a statement that sent shockwaves across the world. Only 4 sentences, yet those 4 sentences changed everything. But what the palace did not say is the real story. Because the statement they released was only the surface, a carefully crafted message designed to inform without exposing. The truth, the full truth, remains buried behind those fortress-like walls. And what is happening inside them right now is far more devastating than anyone outside could possibly imagine. Doctors have been quietly slipping in and out of the palace through private entrances. And Prince William? He hasn't been seen publicly in 72 hours, ever since the situation reached a point where hiding it was no longer possible. What we've uncovered will shock you. This is not just one tragic update. The announcement you read 3 minutes ago? That was only the beginning. Stay with us, because what really happened, and what is still unfolding at this exact moment, will leave you breathless. The 48 hours before everything changed, 2 days before the palace's announcement, Prince William attended what palace records described as a routine medical checkup. Nothing unusual on paper, he had been going quarterly for years. Standard protocol for senior royals to ensure they were fit enough to carry out their demanding duties. But this time, things were different in ways the public couldn't see. Princess Kate drove him herself that morning, a break from standard security protocol, because she had insisted on being the one to take him. The two barely spoke during the drive. They were lost in the private thoughts that had been weighing on them for weeks. When they arrived at the private medical facility in central London, they avoided all public entrances. They used a rear pathway normally reserved for high-security operations, completely shielded from cameras. The appointment was supposed to last 90 minutes. Instead, it stretched into 4 agonizing hours. During that time, William underwent an extensive series of tests, far beyond the usual screenings. Blood panels, full imaging scans, neurological evaluations, layer after layer of diagnostics. And each test brought the doctors closer to the conclusion they had feared, and hoped they were wrong about. When the lead physician finally returned to the room, the look on his face told William and Catherine everything before he said a single word. The news was bad. Worse than bad. William sat frozen as the doctor explained the results. His hands were clasped so tightly that Catherine later said she feared he might break his own fingers. The medical terminology washed over him, long, clinical words he barely understood, yet each one landed with the force of a physical blow. But then the doctor said 2 words William did understand: degenerative. Progressive. Those words cut through everything else, sinking into the air like stones. Beside him, Catherine cried silently, tears streaming unchecked as she struggled to maintain some semblance of composure. "How long?" William finally whispered. The doctor hesitated, the kind of hesitation that tells you everything even before the answer arrives. It varies significantly between patients. With treatment, the doctors explained, they might be able to manage William's symptoms for years. But without treatment, or if the progression proved aggressive, the timeline could shorten drastically. They left the medical facility through the same discreet back entrance, moving like shadows through corridors that suddenly felt far too bright, far too loud. Catherine drove them home, though she would later admit she remembered nothing of the journey. William stared out the window in hollow silence, watching London continue with its busy, ordinary life, people rushing to work, talking on phones, laughing with friends, unaware that his own world had just shattered. When they arrived at Adelaide Cottage, they remained in the car for nearly 20 minutes. Neither could bring themselves to face the children. Neither knew what to say, or how to pretend that everything was still normal when normal had vanished completely. That night, they told no one. Not even their closest staff, not even lifelong friends. They simply moved through the evening in a daze, cooking dinner, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories. But Catherine noticed things, tiny things that cut her deeper than any diagnosis. How William held each child just a little longer when tucking them in. How his voice trembled when he whispered to Louis that he loved him. How he lingered in Charlotte's doorway, watching her breathe as though memorizing the moment. Those small gestures, once simple, everyday expressions of love, now held an unbearable weight. The next morning, a second crisis, but the following morning brought a different, unexpected crisis, one involving Catherine herself. For months, she had been privately managing her own health issue under the care of a specialized medical team. But on this morning, she woke up in severe, sharp pain, the kind that stole her breath and left her clawing at William's arm before she was fully awake. William grabbed the phone immediately. His hands trembled so violently that he dropped it twice before finally dialing. How could this be happening? How could the universe be this cruel, to one family, all at once? Her doctors arrived within the hour, rushing into the house with equipment cases and quiet urgency. They conducted the examinations right there in the bedroom to avoid the risk of a hospital visit leaking to the press. And the results confirmed Catherine's worst fear: her condition had progressed more rapidly than expected. Treatment options that once seemed distant, theoretical choices for a someday future, were now urgent. Decisions had to be made immediately. And those decisions would reshape everything: her health, her role in the royal family, her responsibilities as a mother, her very way of life. Meanwhile, William found himself trapped in an impossible position. His own diagnosis, barely a day old, still sat unprocessed in the back of his mind like a nightmare he hadn't yet woken from. And now Catherine's crisis required immediate action, immediate clarity, immediate strength he didn't feel he had. He felt like he was drowning, pulled under again and again by waves of disaster that gave him no chance to surface for air. The 6-hour emergency meeting by that afternoon, it became clear that secrecy was no longer an option. Senior palace advisors and medical consultants were summoned for an emergency meeting at the most secure room in Kensington Palace, a room designed specifically for discussions that must never be heard, never leaked, never recorded. 12 people sat around the long table. 12 people sworn to absolute secrecy. 12 people about to hear information that would stay with them for the rest of their careers. William spoke first. His voice was steady, but only because he had emptied himself of emotion. He laid out both medical situations with clinical precision, no embellishment, no hesitation. Just the facts. The room fell silent, a heavy, suffocating silence. One advisor, a woman who had served the royal family for 3 decades, quietly broke into tears and couldn't stop. Another, the palace's associate communications chief, turned pale and visibly ill as he grasped the implications for the monarchy. King Charles arrived halfway through the meeting, summoned urgently. He sat with his head bowed, shoulders shaking, a father, not a king, listening to news no parent should ever hear. His son. His daughter-in-law. His grandchildren's future. And not a single ounce of royal power could fix any of it. The meeting stretched for 6 long hours. Medical experts explained treatment plans and prognosis timelines. Legal advisors discussed constitutional implications and possible adjustments to succession duties. Communications officials debated how much the public should be told, and how much must remain hidden. By the end, a fragile plan had taken shape. A plan that would buy time. Time for treatment. Time to speak to the children. Time to figure out what their new future looked like. The statement that said everything and nothing. The official statement was released at exactly 10 a.m., a carefully calculated moment chosen for maximum global reach yet minimal media competition. It appeared instantly across all royal communication channels. Even palace staff outside the inner circle learned about it only when it went live. Many gasped, stunned, reading words that were devastating in their simplicity. The Prince and Princess of Wales are facing serious health challenges that require their immediate and full attention. Prince William has made the difficult decision to step back from official duties for an indefinite period to focus on family and medical matters. The royal family asks for privacy during this time and will provide updates as appropriate. 4 sentences. 4 sentences that hid a mountain of pain behind the illusion of calm. No explanation. No diagnoses. No timeline for William's return. Just a stark confirmation that something was terribly, irreversibly wrong, and that the future king had effectively vanished from public life. Within minutes, the internet erupted. Social media feeds exploded with speculation, panic, and wild theories. The hashtag about William began trending worldwide within 3 minutes. Every major news outlet cut into regular programming to break the story. Even with almost no details beyond the brief palace statement, the world reacted instantly. Inside Kensington Palace, William and Kate watched it all unfold from their sitting room. Notifications on their phones buzzed non-stop until they finally shut them off, unable to handle the torrent of messages from friends and family pleading for answers they could not give. Catherine curled into a chair, drained from the last 2 days, the emotional strain, the physical pain, the fear tightening like a vice around her chest. William stood by the window, staring out at the increased security patrolling the grounds, a visible reminder that their private nightmare was now a matter of global concern. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had been kept home from school. They didn't understand why, but they could feel the tension humming in the air, and for once, they were quiet, gentle, cooperative. William and Kate had decided that today would be the day they told them the truth, or at least the version of the truth their young minds could bear. The thought of that conversation terrified them more than any diagnosis. How do you tell your children that their sense of safety is about to shift? That their parents are sick? That you cannot promise everything will be okay, because you genuinely don't know? A father's desperation. King Charles arrived just before noon, having rushed from Windsor the moment the statement became public. He pulled William into a long, fierce hug, the kind only a father can give. A hug that said everything words could not. When they separated, Charles scanned his son's face, searching for answers he already feared. William led him to the study. For an hour he explained everything: his diagnosis, Catherine's worsening condition, the medical opinions, the grim possibilities. Charles listened in stunned silence, several times covering his face with his hands as the reality crushed him. When William finally finished, the room hung heavy with despair. At last, Charles spoke, his voice raw. "What do you need from me?" "Anything. Everything I have, everything I am, it's yours. Just tell me what you need." William wished it were that simple. "Time," he said quietly. "Time with my family. Privacy. And, if things get worse, if I can't fulfill my role, I need to know you'll protect my children." Charles nodded slowly, his eyes shining. "Your children will always be protected. No matter what happens. They are my priority after you." A tension inside William eased ever so slightly. It wasn't comfort, not truly. But it was something he desperately needed. Kate begins treatment that afternoon. Catherine's medical team returned to begin the first round of an aggressive treatment protocol, one that promised to slow the progression of her illness but would leave her violently sick, bedridden, and weakened for days at a time. William sat beside her as the four-line was placed, holding her hand as medication began to flow. She gripped his fingers so tightly it hurt, and he welcomed the pain because it grounded him, reminded him she was still there. He would have switched places with her without hesitation. Taken her pain, her fear, her suffering into himself. But illness offers no bargains, no trades. All he could do was sit beside her and fight the urge to fall apart. Telling the children that evening, when the house was quiet and the weight of the day felt unbearable, William and Kate gathered the children in the living room. They tried to create a warm, safe atmosphere, but both parents were trembling inside. The children sensed it. They settled around them with wide eyes and silent anticipation. William began softly. "You know Mommy and Daddy have had some health appointments lately." The children nodded. "The doctors have told us some things that mean our lives will change a little for a while. We're going to need treatment and rest, so we'll be home more and doing fewer royal events." George, older and more perceptive, studied his father's face. Fear and confusion flickered through his eyes. "Are you dying, Dad?" The blunt impact of the question nearly broke William. He inhaled slowly, steadying his voice. "Everyone dies eventually. But that's not what's happening right now. We're getting help to manage being sick. Some days may be hard, but we're going to fight as hard as we can to be here with you for a very long time." Charlotte began to cry, sensing danger more than understanding it. Louis climbed into Kate's lap, his small body shaking. She wrapped her arms around him despite her own pain. They talked for over an hour, carefully, gently, answering questions without overwhelming them. By the end, the children understood only what they needed to. Life would look different, their parents needed care, and they would be spending more time together. It wasn't the full truth. But it was enough for now. When the children finally went to bed, William and Kate collapsed onto the sofa, utterly drained. Catherine rested against his shoulder as they sat in stunned silence, two people walking through darkness with no map, no guarantees, and no way to turn back. But William had a secret. What the public statement didn't say, what Catherine didn't fully understand, was that William's condition was far more serious than he had admitted. During his initial consultation, the doctors had given him two options. Option 1. Start immediate, aggressive treatment, surgeries, medications with brutal side effects, months of incapacity. Option 2. Decline treatment and focus on palliative care, preserving quality of life but accepting a shorter timeline. William refused both. He had chosen a third path, one the doctors had warned against. An experimental treatment in Switzerland. A protocol so risky it was barely past the trial stage. Early results showed promise, but the dangers were immense. Even if it worked, it would not cure him. At best, it might buy him a few precious years. The doctors told him they could not recommend it. That the risks outweighed the potential benefits. That he needed to consider his family, his responsibilities, the throne. But William saw only one thing, the faint possibility of more time with his children. So he made inquiries. He contacted the Swiss facility himself. He shared his medical records. He signed the legal documents acknowledging the risks, including the possibility he might not survive the procedures. He planned to travel within the month. And he had told no one. Not his father. Not his staff. Not even Catherine. He intended to tell everyone he was going abroad for rest, privacy, and recovery, a believable explanation given their public circumstances. But the truth was far more dangerous. The guilt consumed him. He and Catherine had promised each other full honesty, to share every fear, every burden. And yet here he was, withholding the most terrifying truth of all. He told himself he would explain everything when she was stronger. When she wasn't already drowning in her own crisis. When she could carry the weight without breaking. What he didn't know was that the consequences of the secret would be far greater than he ever expected. And once the initial shock faded, he tried to convince himself he was calm, but deep down he knew he was lying. His reasoning was cold, brutally logical. If the experimental treatment worked, even partially, he would gain more time with his family. Extra years that would otherwise be stolen from him. Yes, the treatment carried a real chance of failure, even of hastening his death. But dying while fighting for more time felt far more bearable than quietly accepting the timeline his doctors had given him. He thought of George, who would one day be king and needed his father's guidance for as long as possible. He thought of Charlotte, her teenage years on the horizon, milestones he desperately wanted to witness. And little Louis, so young that if William's decline happened as quickly as feared, he might not remember his father clearly at all. The Swiss facility had given William a start date, 4 weeks from now. 1 month. 1 month to stabilize Catherine, ensure the children were adjusting, and put everything at home in order. After that, he would leave, telling everyone he was going for rest and intensive therapy. The facility promised absolute confidentiality, no visitors, no communication beyond short messages confirming he was alive and managing. It would be the hardest thing he had ever done. But if it offered even a tiny chance at extra time, he was willing to make the sacrifice. Palace officials who had been briefed on William stepping back had no idea about Switzerland. They assumed he would be resting at Adelaide Cottage, attending medical appointments in London. If the treatment failed, if he never returned, at least he would know he tried everything possible. Catherine noticed his distraction, how his mind drifted during conversations. She assumed it was stress, fear, the same things consuming her. She never imagined he was planning something they hadn't discussed. One evening, about a week after the public announcement, she asked him directly if he was telling her everything. William looked into her eyes and said, "Yes. Everything the doctors told me. I'm scared, but we're handling this together." And she believed him. Why wouldn't she? In all their years together, William had never given her reason to doubt him. But King Charles, perceptive in ways people underestimated, sensed something was wrong. During a private visit, he confronted his son. "You're planning something. I see it in your face. It's the look you get when you're determined to do something others would try to stop." William wanted to continue the lie, but he couldn't lie to his father's face. So he told him the truth, the treatment, the risks, the timeline, and the secret he was keeping from Catherine. Charles listened silently, then asked one question: "If you die doing this, how do I explain to your wife and children why you weren't here when you could have been?" William had no answer. The question haunted him, but it did not change his resolve. Charles recognized the futility of arguing and made him promise only one thing: tell Catherine before he left. Don't disappear without giving her the right to be part of the decision. William reluctantly agreed. The conversation that changed everything. 10 days before he was scheduled to leave, he realized he couldn't wait any longer. The secrecy was eating him alive, turning every interaction into something hollow. He waited until the children were asleep, until the house was silent. Then he asked Catherine to sit with him. She sensed immediately that something was wrong, her expression shifting from tired contentment to sharp concern. William took her hands, feeling how cold they were. "I haven't been completely honest with you about my treatment options, about what I'm planning." Her face went pale. She didn't interrupt, just gripped his hands tighter. Then William told her everything. With each revelation, Catherine's expression changed: shock, hurt, anger, fear, emotions moving across her face like weather. When he finished, the silence between them was suffocating. She pulled her hands away, walked to the window, her back to him. She needed time. He let her have it, knowing he deserved whatever followed. Finally, she turned, and the look on her face shattered him. "You were going to leave. Disappear for months. Undergo a treatment that could kill you. And you plan to lie about where you were." Her voice was quiet, but every word struck like a blow. "Did you think about me at all? What it would do to me to lose you while believing you were just away resting?" William stood, wanting to go to her but not daring to cross the space between them. "Of course I thought about you. That's why I'm doing this, to have more time with you and the children. It's risky, but it's the only real hope I have." Catherine let out a bitter laugh. "And if you die there? If I get a call saying you're gone and I never got to say goodbye because you lied? Did you think about that?" She accused him of being selfish, of making unilateral decisions about treating her as someone too fragile for the truth. He defended himself, raising his voice, insisting he was trying to protect her. But deep down, he knew she was right. He had acted out of fear, not partnership. They argued until their voices were raw, saying things they would later regret, exposing wounds long buried. When the anger burned out, only exhaustion and grief remained. Catherine collapsed onto the couch, sobbing harder than he'd ever seen. "I can't lose you. I can't do this without you. And you're asking me to let you go do something that might take you away forever. How is that fair? How is that love?" William sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Nothing about this is fair. But I'm terrified of dying and leaving you all. I'm willing to risk everything for a chance at more time." They cried together, holding each other in the darkness while their children slept upstairs, unaware of the storm unfolding below them. Eventually, Catherine wiped her eyes and looked at him. "I want to talk to your doctors in Switzerland. I want the truth. The real odds. I'm not making this decision based on your fear." William nodded. "Tomorrow. Ask them everything." The truth revealed 3 weeks into the treatment, everything changed. William had been pushed to his physical limits, enduring pain he never described in his brief calls home. Catherine managed the household alone, holding everything together in front of the children and breaking down only at night. Then the call came. Not from William. From the head physician. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw the unfamiliar number, certain it was that call. But instead, the doctor said, "My princess, your husband is alive. But you must come to Switzerland immediately. There has been a development." The hours that followed were a blur, arranging childcare, rushing to the airport, the flight that felt both endless and far too fast. When she arrived, she found William in a hospital bed, thinner, paler, exhausted, but alive. She collapsed into the chair beside him, overwhelmed. William reached for her hand. "I told you I'd come home." "You're not home," she whispered through tears, half laughing. "You look like you've been through a war." He managed a weak smile. "It worked. I'm going to have time. Time to watch our children grow. Time to grow old with you. Time we thought was gone." She kissed him, tasting salt and hope. "You terrified me. More than I can ever explain." "I know," he whispered. "And I'm sorry. But I'd do it again. For this outcome, I'd do it again." Coming home when William was finally cleared to return, everything was orchestrated to protect the narrative that he'd been resting at Balmoral. He arrived at Adelaide Cottage under cover of night, walking into a home where his children were waiting up despite the late hour. They rushed him with hugs and excited chatter, blind to the weight he carried. George looked closely at him. "Are you actually better?" William knelt despite the pain. "I'm better. Not completely. But better than I was. And I'm home." But privately, both he and Catherine knew the truth. His condition was improved, not cured. There would be good years and hard ones. The future was uncertain, frighteningly so, but also strangely freeing. Catherine's treatment continued as well, and she improved steadily. Their parallel battles formed a bond deeper than anything before, a shared understanding of fear, hope, and the fragility of time. They began treasuring the small things, a painless morning, a day with energy, a quiet evening without medical emergencies. These moments became their most precious possessions. Months passed. William slowly returned to public life, choosing engagements that wouldn't overtax his recovering body. People noticed the difference. He seemed more present, more human, more real. Facing mortality had stripped away his armor. He kept the videos he'd recorded before leaving for Switzerland, not deleting them, but adding to them. Messages about survival, gratitude, and second chances. They became a record of the journey that reshaped him.